Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Sunday, January 23rd, 2011, and I'm Darko. Welcome everybody to this economic news bulletin. This is part 2, so if you missed part 1, check it out. I'm trying to find a way to put a link in the videos so you can find it easier, these the second and third parts. Someone, viewer, basically asked me to requested that I do that, and I tried to do it, and I had a little bit of technical problems. I couldn't find it. But after the videos have been seen a little bit, they tend to show up in the recent or related videos section to the right. But I usually post all the links to these articles in the description, the video's description below, so you can find the little headline and then the link. Beyond that, I just usually ask my listeners to please visit my website, www.ggnonline.com. That's ggnonline.com. All right, we finished up with this. It's 12 economic collapse scenarios that we could potentially see in 2011. We covered part 1 about China suddenly deciding to start dumping all of the U.S. debt that they have accumulated. And it says number 2, speaking of threats to the global financial system, it turns out that quantitative easing too has had the exact opposite effect that Ben Bernanke planned for it to have. Bernanke insisted that the main goal of QE2 was to lower interest rates, but instead of all it has done is cause interest rates to go up substantially. Okay, number 3, the debt bubble that the entire global economy is based on could burst at any time and throw the whole planet into chaos. According to a new report from the World Economic Forum, the total amount of credit in the world increased from 57 trillion in 2000 to 109 trillion in 2009. It says the WEF says that now the world is going to need another 100 trillion in credit to support projected economic growth over the next decade. I covered that article too, where they were calling for that. And it says, so this is how the new global economy works. We just keep doubling the total number of debt every decade. We're going to keep moving here. Number 4 is the U.S. government and the Fed continue to pump massive amounts of dollars into the system. The floor could fall out from underneath the U.S. dollar at any time. And he says the truth is we're starting to see inflation really accelerate, and everyone pretty much acknowledges that the official U.S. government figures for inflation are an absolute joke. According to one study, the cost of college tuition has risen 286% over the last 20 years, and the cost of hospital, nursing home, and adult daycare services rose 270%. It says one of the primary drivers of global inflation during 2011 could be the price of oil. A large number of economists are now projecting that the price of oil could surge well past $100 a barrel, and it will in 2011. It's about to. Number 6, food inflation is already so bad in some areas of the globe that it's setting off massive food riots in nations such as Tunisia and Algeria. And it says, in fact, there have been reports of people setting themselves on fire all over the Middle East as a way to draw attention to how desperate they are. Number 7, there are persistent rumors that will simply not go away of massive physical gold and silver shortages. It says demand for precious metals has never been higher, but Reuters will tell you that it's waning. Number 8, the U.S. housing industry could plunge the U.S. economy into another recession at any time. That's right, I've covered this, where it says another housing bubble could pop, and we could go into another housing crisis. I believe it was a Reuters article. If it wasn't, it was definitely a pretty credible source that I read or I covered. It says number 9, a combination of extreme weather and disease could make this an absolute brutal year for U.S. farmers this winter. It says we have already seen thousands of new cold weather and snowfall records set across the United States. It says here, number 10, the municipal bond crisis could go supernova at any time. Already, investors are bailing out of bonds at a frightening pace. State and local government debt is now sitting at an all-time high of 22% of U.S. GDP. And let's see. It's going to keep moving here and finish up. And it says here, number 11, of course, on top of everything else, the quadrillion-dollar derivatives bubble could burst at any time. Right now we're watching the greatest financial casino in the history of the global spin around, and everyone is hoping that at some point it doesn't stop. So number 12, the biggest wild card of all is war. The Korean Peninsula came closer to war in 2010 than it ever had in decades. The Middle East could literally explode at any time. We live in a world where a single weapon could take out an entire city in an instant. And we're going to keep moving here. And next up is grain revolution reaches low and middle class countries. It says since the 1950s, smaller family sizes and longer life expectancies have steadily expanded the ranks of the elderly in many societies. A shift from some commentators have dubbed the graying revolution. It says population aging is a global issue that is affecting or will soon affect virtually every country around the world at a time when family support and other traditional safety nets have become less certain. It says what we find is that many developing countries are getting older before they become more prosperous, which is the reverse of the OECD experience. He says it's a cause for worry. And I'm going to finish up right here with these little tidbits. Developing and middle income countries must care for growing numbers of the elderly, but often without enough money or experience. In less developed regions, life expectancy increased by 26 years from 1950 to 55 to 2005 to 2010. Two World Bank reports address the economic impact of aging populations worldwide and offer direction on policy reforms. So you can go out and check that the Graying Revolution article. It's pretty big, and you can definitely check these out. The link will be posted. Next up is regulators close 4 banks. U.S. regulators Friday announced the failure of United Western Bancorp Inc. banking subsidiary, while 3 banks in the U.S. Southeast also closed as smaller institutions continue to struggle in the weak economy. And then you have this one, regulators shut small Georgia Bank, 3rd this year. So if that's the 3rd, then that means it's 7 banks this year. And that's all about squashing competition. That's all that has to do about. That's all that has to do with that issue. They're just taking out the big banks, the big lenders' competition. So that's what this recovery is about. It's about killing competition, taking out the competition, and consolidating. Next up column, China to replace U.S. as top economic power, says GE CEO for Jeff Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, the 130-year-old American industrial behemoth. The financial crisis marked the end of the age of America's economic dominance. So who does Obama pick to lead the new Economic Council? The GE head. Okay. President Obama, or Barry Soetoro, who was born in Kenya, announced the creation of the Economic Advisory Council Friday that will be headed by Jeffrey Immelt, the chief executive and chairman of General Electric. So, and of course their profits have been soaring. Rescue fund head, it says here, enough money for Portugal and Spain. Europe's bailout fund has enough money to cover potential rescues of both Portugal and much larger Spain, while Greece doesn't need a debt restructuring as some investors fear, the head of the fund insisted on Thursday. For Ireland, responsible for its problems, says Barroso. A visibly angry European Commission president has rejected suggestions that the terms of Ireland's EU bailout would make vassals of Irish taxpayers. So you can go and check that one out. Next up is U.S. cities seek to tax churches. And then next up, unions see sharp membership declines again. Share of Fed income swallowed by deficit coverage. Borrowing jumps 566% in 3 years, the IRS reports. You can go and check that out. It's pretty amazing, the numbers that they have in there. Charter schools expand with public-private money as cash-strapped school district lay off teachers and close campuses. Publicly funded charter schools are flourishing and altering the landscape of public re-education and indoctrination. And I'm against these things for the simple fact that Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey are for them because they're eugenicists. So, state bankruptcy bill imminent. Oh yeah, I just want to say that I'm kind of for homeschooling. I haven't been homeschooled myself. I was raised in private and public schools, so I've had the worst of both worlds, and I wish I was homeschooled. It hasn't made me any more of a sociable person. So I don't like that whole crappy theory that people give about how the people aren't going to be socialized if they're homeschooled. It's like, get over it, people. You know what I'm talking about? It's just... Is there some big, is there a lot to learn about being able to cope in modern society? Is there something? Because all I see is a bunch of dumbasses that don't know how to think for themselves. That's all I see. So, state bankruptcy bill imminent, Gingrich says legislation that would allow U.S. states to file for bankruptcy will likely be introduced into Congress within the next month, Newt Gingrich told the House. Alrighty, here we go. Global economy shifting eastwards. It says the dominance of the West over the global economy will decline as the economic power is moving eastward, says a professor of binary economics. So that sounds good for us in the homeland of the free. China Bank moves to buy U.S. branches. ICBC signs a deal for Bank of East Asia's retail outlets. So China's biggest bank signed an agreement that would make it the first Beijing-controlled financial institution to acquire retail bank branches inside the United States, though regulators could still block the deal. Up next is, look who's coming to Woodridge. China's president's visit, that's weird the way they worded that, takes Illinois town by surprise. Obama hasn't even been here, and you go down and you see what he's actually going there for, and he's going there for companies. Chicago-based Wang Xing America, an auto parts maker, and there was another one too, Bridge Development Partners. So you basically going to check out their companies and that, making sure everything is good to go. Ford aims to export more to China. A senior Ford Motor Company executive said Friday that the automaker is in preliminary talks with Chinese authorities about exporting more North American-built vehicles to China's fast-growing domestic market. So next up, we have Mao's for Benji's. Chinese money is here. Says a major issue that will be discussed during the Chinese president who visit, well, it's what already took place, the White House, is a disputed value. The Chinese currency, the yuan, said, yeah, people can now get the yuan right here. The state-run Bank of China now lets customers exchange dollars for Chinese money at the branch in New York City's Chinatown. So instead of withdrawing greenbacks with George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, you can now stuff your wallet with the money that hasn't been engraved with a portrait of Mao Zedong. Next up, China devalues U.S. buying power by 30%, protects U.S. Treasury holdings. This is from Zero Hedge. You can come in here and check this out. The link will be posted. Analysis, what is Plan B if China dumps its U.S. debt? When borrowing money, it's always good to have a Plan B in case a big creditor pulls the plug. That should be true whether the sum is a few $1,000s or about $1 trillion, the size of the United States government debt to China. Up next, China trims U.S. debt holdings in November. This is from the 19th. China, the biggest buyer of U.S. Treasury securities, cut its holdings in November after 4 months of gains. So, more news on China is the Chinese government secretly buying U.S. Treasuries through the UK. As said Floyd Norris at the Wall Street Journal, thinks China may be masking its purchase of U.S. securities. For 8 years after the U.S. resumed running large budget deficits in 2002, China was the largest lender, buying a fifth of the new Treasury securities sold during that span, and an expenditure of more than $900 billion. During 2006, China financed more than half of the American deficit. When the financial crisis struck the hardest, China spent more than $100 billion on treasuries over the 2-month period of September and October. But over the last year, China is a net seller of treasury securities, according to figures released this week by the American government. If that's true, it would be extraordinary considering the size of the bilateral trade deficit, and there has been speculation that China has been purchasing treasuries through accounts in other countries. You can check the rest of that out. China issues new regulations on house expropriation, says China's State Council or Cabinet Friday published the newly adopted regulations on the expropriation of houses on state-owned land and compensation. The new rules, which took effect upon the issuing in 2001, it says here, the new rules specifically stated that neither violence or coercion may be used to force homeowners to leave, nor could measures such as illegally cutting water and power supplies be used in relocation works. So next up is Apple rated worst multinational polluter in China. It says here Apple Incorporated is known for creating computers, iPhones, and other electronic devices with unique lines and clean designs, but the multinational giant has also been pinned as the worst company for pollution and, quote, occupational health hazard incidents at its facilities in China. Next up, Beijing to broadcast live first ever car license lottery. Man, I wish we had that in the United States, whether we had basically had to have a lottery in order just to drive a car. Beijing is ready to kick off its first ever license plate lottery to be broadcast live on TV. Said a total of 17,600 car license plates will be allocated to qualified individual applicants through the lottery, in keeping with the principles of openness, fairness, and equity. Yeah, that's very fair. Female bodyguard secures new job at human auction. Former soldier became one of the first humans in the country Wednesday to be auctioned off to another person as an employee. Goldman profit slides as bond trading wilts. Goldman Sachs Group posted a 53% decline in the fourth quarter profit as trading revenue tumbled, dashing hopes that the Wall Street Bank had bucked a tough trading climate in debt markets. Well, No, they need another BP disaster. They need another 9/11. They need another housing bubble. That's what they need, because companies like this, that's how they thrive. That's how they keep going. They bet off, bad events, negative events, because they know what's going to happen. This is GGN. I'm Dark.